Welcome to a series of tutorials on a Microsoft Access Invoice application. My name is Shad Sluiter, and my website is studyoffice.org. What we're going to create in this series is a simple version of a cash register application, or a point of sale. We're going to use Microsoft Access to build something like you would see on the computer at Walmart at your self-checkout. In Microsoft Access, there are 4 parts to a program. There are tables, forms, queries, and reports. And we'll show each of these in 8 simple lessons. There's going to be 8 parts to this application, so this tutorial will take you probably an hour or 2 of full-time work on the computer. We're going to create tables, and so these tables will be for all of the information in our computer. Then we're going to create a few forms where you enter data. And then we're going to create a query so we can have sorted data, and finally a report where we can print it out. So here's what the program will look like when we're done. We're going to have a customer form where we can enter in the information for our customers. We can scroll through the customers to see who they are. We're going to have a products form where we can enter in different types of things that we sell in our company. We'll have a vendors form so you can see all the different companies that sell us items, our wholesalers. The heart and soul of the program is called the invoice table, or the form for the invoices. It will let us choose to purchase items, pick one of our customers, and then we'll decide how many of each thing they're going to buy, and it will give us a subtotal at the bottom of the page. So that gives you kind of a preview of what we're going to see in our program. So let's get started. In this first video, we're going to create the customer table. I'm going to choose all programs and go look for Microsoft Office and choose Access 2013. The first thing I'm going to do is start a blank database. So I'll click here on the database icon for blank. Access forces you to save your file before you begin anything else. And so we need to give it a file name and location. I'm going to call mine Sluiter Store. You can name yours something similar. Choose the folder, pick a location, and click OK. Click the Create button. The most basic building block for any Access database is the table. And you notice here that we have something called Table 1 already created. And it's asking for us to add some information. Access assumes that we're just going to start typing in some data. I'm going to actually change this by right-clicking on the title Table 1 and choosing Design View. Table 1 needs a name. I'm going to call this Customer Table. And so this is basically a spreadsheet that's going to hold all of the names of our customers. The first field name of a table usually is something called ID. In this case, I'm going to call it Customer ID. And notice it is an auto number. So each number will be assigned automatically to our customers as we enter them. Let's click on the next line down. Since we're collecting data about our customers, we're going to collect their name and their address and some things about their business relationship with us. So I'll start by naming something called last name. Notice how you don't use any spaces in here. A short text is a good type for a name. It's only 255 letters long, as you can see down here, which is enough for most names. So let's put in our first name. Also, we'll choose short text. Let's do street address. Once more, we can use short text. What other kind of information do you store in your customer table? Things like their city and their state. So city and state. These are all short texts. Let's go to zip code. For zip code, you might be tempted to choose number, but we're going to leave it as text in case they live in a foreign country or else we have leading zeros in our zip code. Let's explore some of the other types, though, that are here. There is a type called time and date. Let's choose this one. Let's call it customer since. And so customer since is going to be the day when they became our customer. Another format that we see is a yes/no format. We could call this free shipping customer or free shipping status. And so if we check that box, it means they are going to get free shipping from us. I'm going to right-click now on the customer tab up at the top, push save. Right-click again, and I'm going to choose Data Sheet View. Now you'll see that this looks something like a spreadsheet now. I can start entering information in here. So the last name, I just type in Smith, and I type in any type of name. Let's go with the address, 123 Main Street, and the city, let's say Phoenix, and Arizona, and the zip code is 85087. And what is this one? Customer since. Now, when we want to enter a date here, there is a date picker icon here. If you click this, you can choose a date when this became a customer. And so we have 2/15. Let's scroll a little bit further to the right. We have the option to either check for free shipping or no. This is the free shipping status. So let's give this person free shipping. Now you can see why this is called the data table view, because we're creating a table of data. Now I've finished typing in about 15 names. So I have their name and their address, their city, state, zip, when they became a customer, and some of these I've chosen to be part of the free shipping club and some I've left alone. Now you can sort your database here. If you click on the words last name, you can tell it to sort from A to Z, or you can sort it in reverse order. So you can sort any of these by their city, by their state, by their alphabetized, or when they were joined to the company. And so sorting is one thing that you can do in a table. Let's save the table, so right-click on the tab and choose Save. Let's right-click and close it. If we were to go and double-click the table, we can open it again. We can enter more data if we want. We can change data. We can delete data. For instance, if we want to delete this person here, I could right-click on the front of the row, and there is an item for Delete Record. It says you won't be able to undo this information, so are you sure? Click Yes. Now if I sort by the ID number, you will notice that it skipped it. 1, 3, 4, 5. And so ID numbers are never replaced. They are always one bigger than the last. So they will never be another ID for person 2. Let's close this and save the changes. One other way to enter a data is to create a form. I'm going to click on the customer table, up to the Create menu, and click here where it says Form. This will create a form automatically that includes all of the data that I've entered already. Let's save this form, and we'll call it Customer Form. So I'm going to rename it. Click OK. Down at the bottom, it shows that I'm viewing the records in sequence from number 1 through 14. So as I click these arrows, the forward and the back arrow, I browse before and after through my customers. When I reach the end, I come to customer 14, and now when I try to create a new one, the 15th customer, it's asking me to enter new data. So I can enter data here. I have to go to the right-click on the tab and choose Form View. Then I'm allowed to create a new customer. So once I've entered all the information, I click another Next Record, and a new one comes up. Now if I go and close this form, and now I reopen the table, by double-clicking you will see that I have the new person in the list. So in most programs, you want to have users enter data in through forms, and so that's what forms are created for. You can also modify how your form is designed. If you right-click and choose Layout View, it allows you to adjust the width of each column. You could also right-click and choose Design View. Inside Design View, you can change the format, you can change the size of things, but you can also adjust how things are formatted. So for instance, down here in this field called Customer Since, I can come over to the right side here and choose a different format for my words. I can choose things like medium date or long date. Let's try what medium date looks like. And then when I do Form View, you see the medium date now shows the abbreviation for the month. Inside here you can also adjust things like the the text alignment. So instead of being left aligned, you can center it. You can change the font size if you want to have larger letters. You can change the colors. You can change the font name. So all of the different things that you're accustomed to seeing on most word processors, you can change in these fields. Lastly, I'm going to close this, save the changes, and there you have the first lesson on creating customer data in your database. In this video, we're going to create a second table. We've created a table for our customers. Next, we're going to create a table for our vendors. So let's go to the Create menu. Click on the button called Table, and let's do a right-click on the tab Table 1 and save the table. This time we're going to call this Vendors Table. So these are going to be all the people that sell things to our business so that we can resell them to our customers. Inside our Table tab, we're going to change to Design View, and now let's add a few fields for our vendors. First of all, let's rename this ID as Vendor ID. And now our vendors are going to have a few information fields. All of these we'll use as short text. After you've entered your field names, let's save our table. Next, let's enter into the data sheet view, and we can enter some information about who these people are, who sells to us so that we can sell to others. So you can see that I've typed in 6 different vendors. I'm going to be a company that actually sells video games and computer equipment. So I'm using Apple and Amazon as some of my people that are making things so that I can resell them to my customers. Let's right-click on the tab that says the title and save. Let's close this. And now I'm going to create a form. So let's go back to the Create button. Since Customers is selected, I want to select the other table, Vendors. Then click on the Form button, and you will see it creates the Vendors table. This actually is something I want to create. It's called the Vendors Form. So let's save it. And instead of Vendors Table, let's call it Vendors Form. Remember that when you do Form View, you can enter in data, you can browse through each of the records, and so Data Sheet View and Form View are the same way to see your data, but with different front ends. So this will do it for our second video here on creating our application to run our business. Welcome to a third video on creating our Access database for our business. Remember, our business is going to keep track of how many things we sell and who we sell them to. In this video, we're going to create a table that will show how many products we have in our inventory. So let's go to the Create menu, and we'll start by creating a table. I'd like to, first of all, right-click on the tab and choose Save. Let's call this thing our Products table. So our products are the things that we sell. And so in our Products table, we're going to keep track of every item in our warehouse, or in our catalog, you might say. Let's switch to Design View. And let's name a few of these fields. First of all, this is called our Product ID. And we'll leave it as Auto Number. The next thing we need is a name, so let's call this Product Name. So this might be some name like our car or phone or some computer that we sell. Who sells this? Who makes it? And that's the third part we're going to come up with here. It's going to call our Vendor ID. And we're going to leave that as short text for right now, but we're going to come back to that and change it. What else do you have in a product? Well, we have a wholesale price. The wholesale price is what they charge us when we buy it from our suppliers. And so the wholesale price is always less than the retail price. The retail price is what we sell it for. And so this is what our customers have to pay when they come into our store. Now these last two items, the wholesale price and the retail price, should be renamed. Instead of the data type of short text, let's change these to currency. So we're going to keep track of dollars and cents in these fields. So it makes sense that we name the field here. So it's going to be a number. But let's go to the vendor ID. This here is going to tell us which vendor is selling us this product. So how do I make sure that this vendor ID matches one of the vendors in our vendor table? Here's what we do. Instead of adding this field as short text, we're going to change this to something called a lookup wizard. A lookup means we're going to look it up in another table. So I choose this and it says, the wizard creates a lookup field, which displays values that you can choose from. How do you want your lookup field to get its values? I want the lookup field to get values from another table. So in our case, we're going to take the vendor ID from the vendors table. Remember, we're in the products table right now, but we're going to borrow a number from the vendors table. Let's go to the next button. Which table would you like to take your values from? We're going to go to the vendors table and look up there. So I'm going to choose next again. When we do our lookup, we have to choose vendor ID, because the vendor ID in this table is going to match a vendor ID in our vendors table. So I'm going to add that. Now it's difficult to remember the ID number for each vendor, so I'm also going to tell it to use the vendor name along with the ID. That'll help us be able to search and find things that we are looking for. Now when we are searching for a vendor ID, how do we want to sort them? I'm going to sort them by the vendor name. Now it says when you do a lookup, when you choose a value from another table, would you like to hide the key or like to show it? They recommend hiding it. I'm going to actually show the vendor ID because it makes it more transparent to see how the program's designed. Let's go to the next button. Now it says, when you select a row in the lookup field, you can store a value in that field in your database. Notice that my vendor ID is the field that we're talking about here. This is the one that we're doing the lookup on. And so I want this vendor ID to match the vendor ID in the vendors table. So I want to make sure that this one is selected. Now what would the value of your label be? I'm going to choose vendor ID here. So the label will stay the same. I am not changing that. Now we can also tell this thing to enable this called data integrity. What this means is if there is a vendor ID in our products table, it has to match with a vendor in the vendors table. So there will be no orphan products, like a product that we have in our warehouse that has no manufacturer. So this means data integrity says one table affects another table. Let's finish now. Now it says we're going to create a relationship between these tables. The table must be saved before the relationship can be created. Do you want to save it now? Yes, we do. Now, it doesn't look like anything changed here. We did this whole lookup process, but let's go ahead and close this table. And now we're going to choose database tools to see what went on behind the scenes. Click on this button called relationships. And you'll see that there are two tables listed in the relationship. Notice our vendors table and our products table. The relationship is between this field here and this field here. In other words, a product in our list will have a vendor ID associated with it. And so the vendor name for, let's say, Apple computer will have some products in it, such as an iPhone or a Mac or an iPad. And so the vendor ID is associated with a company. Notice also the number here. This says 1, and this is the sign for infinity. That means that we have a one-to-many relationship. One vendor can match many different products. You'll see in a minute when we start entering data how this works. I'm going to close the relationships, tell it yes to save them. Now let's go open the products table. Double-click it. We can start entering some data. For instance, let's talk about that iPhone, the product name. We're going to sell an iPhone in our store, but it's going to ask what vendor sells your iPhone. And here is the relationship now. Notice this list of vendors. This matches everything that we've typed in an earlier video. So I'm going to say Apple Computer. That's our vendor ID number 1. What's the wholesale price? Let's say we buy them for $400 and we sell them for $650. And so we have the first product. Let's do another one. Let's say we're selling Windows version 10. And our vendor in this case is going to be Microsoft. We buy this for $45 and we sell it for $120. So let's go invent some other products that we have in our store. So you can see that I've entered 11 different products. You can enter more if you like. Every product has an ID of a vendor, and so you can see who is selling each item. The wholesale price is what we buy it from the vendor, and the retail price is what we expect to sell it to the customers for. So now let's do a save and close on this. Now, just like we did before, we created a form for each of our tables so we can enter in through the form view. Let's do the same here with our products. So let's click on Products, click on Create, and choose Form. Now each form has its product and its description, and so we can enter and edit data just like we did with the other tables. Let's save this, and let's call this thing our Products form. I'm going to go back to the Vendors form, open this up. Our Vendors form is very basic. It just shows the address for each of our companies. But since we added products to our computer, we're going to recreate this form. So I'm going to go back to the Vendors table, click on Create and Form, and you notice that the new form that it created is different. The new form looks a lot like the old form. It shows the address of the company. However, what is different is that it's added another table below. This is a subform. So this takes all of the data from our products table and associates it with each vendor. So for instance, Apple Computer sells iPhones, iPads, and Mac Airs. So let's go to the next vendor in our list. So way down at the bottom where it says there are 6 vendors, I'm going to choose the next record. And it shows us that Office Depot sells 2 different things. Let's go to the next record. Microsoft sells a few things to us, and you notice that the associated records are all listed down here with what products that this company sells. So this is an improvement over our existing vendors form. So let's call it Vendors Form 2. Let's go look at the old vendors form. It's not near as useful, so I'm going to actually delete this one. I'm going to close it, and I'm going to go to the vendors form in the index here and delete it. Let's say yes, it's permanent. So the vendors form 2 is the improved version. We can keep that one, and that will be the end of our video here for adding products to our application. Welcome to our 4th video on Access in creating an application for keeping track of our business. I'm going to go to Google Images now and search for something called an invoice form. What does an invoice form look like? Well, you've seen whenever you buy something from a company, they give you a receipt. And so your invoice or your invoice form would look like this. We have the customer name up here, and then we have a bunch of line items in here about things that we purchased. We'll probably have a date and probably have an invoice number. Let's look at some of the other examples that we would see on the internet. Here's another one. It looks similar. The name of the customer. We have a specific list of things that we're going to do. Let's see what this one looks like. Another invoice that says we have an invoice number. The same idea. Who was a salesperson? What did we buy? And this whole list here will be maybe 10, maybe 15, maybe 3. Some number of items that are on the invoice, and then we calculate the total. So this is what we'd like to create here in the next step of our program. So now let's go into our program that we've been working on, and we're going to start by creating a table called the Invoice table. So I'm going to the Create menu and choose Table. First thing you do when you choose Design View is that you have to save it. So I'm going to call this the Invoice table. Inside the invoice table, we're going to have a invoice ID number. So each transaction will have its own invoice. We should probably have the word date of sale. That's probably important to know when did we do this. So let's change this format to date time. It's also important to know that who our customer is for this particular invoice. So let's say customer ID. And now we already have a list of customers in another table. We have the customers table. And so the ID is going to correspond to this table. So it'll be another relationship. Like before, we're going to choose a lookup wizard so that we can choose which table we're going to get this information from. So I'm going to leave this check that says I want the lookup field to get the values from another table. Which table am I going to get this data from? Well, I'm looking for customer IDs, so it would make sense that they are in the customer table. Which fields am I interested in looking at? Well, I'm going to need customer ID, but I'd also just like to use the last name and the first name, so I don't need any of the rest of the stuff. How would I sort these customers? It would make sense to sort them by last name. Now in this case, I'm going to leave this check mark checked that says hide the key column. We saw that using the ID number was okay to see how the computer actually looks up these numbers, but for most purposes, it's probably simpler to leave that key hidden. Let's leave this as the name shows. Let's make sure integrity is checked so that way you have an invoice number that matches each customer, and click Finish. Let's save it. Now for these 3 items in our list, this will match pretty close to what we see on the top half of most of the invoice examples that you would find at a business. It shows the customer name, it shows the invoice number, and it shows the date. All the stuff that we have down here in the details of the invoice, we're going to leave for another table. So for now, we're just going to use these 3. Let's close this table. Let's go see what happened in our database tools. Choose relationships. We'll see that nothing appears to have happened at first. We have the vendors and the products. Let's go show some more tables. Let's show the customer table, and let's show the invoice table. Now you'll see that there's a relationship between 2 more tables here, the customer table and the invoice table. So this is a one-to-many relationship, which means that one customer can have many different invoices, but each invoice is exactly related to only one customer. Now this is only half of what we need for an invoice. We need also a table of all the details. Let's save the changes here. Now let's create a new table. This one I'm going to create, and I'm going to call this thing the invoice details. On the invoice details, we're going to have a table showing the details for each separate invoice. So first of all, this is going to be called Invoice Detail ID. So every table starts with an ID number. The first thing I care about is according to which invoice am I dealing with. So I'm going to say Invoice ID is next. We're going to look up that from another table. So I'll choose Lookup Wizard. I'm going to choose Pick from another table. This time I'm going to select from the invoice table. I'm going to say this is the only field that I'm interested in. Click Next. It won't matter how I sort this since there's only one field. And now it's going to show the invoice ID. Let's also always check this and finish. Let's save it. Now, other details. After we have an invoice ID associated with this, we're going to have a list of things that we sold. For instance, we're going to have a product. What product did we sell to our customer? So we're going to get that product from the products table. So we're going to have to do another lookup. This time we're going to get the lookup from our products, and we're going to use the product name as well as the ID. Let's sort by product name, and let's leave it as this. Let's enable integrity and finish. So once I've figured out what the product is, I want to know about how many of each of these products we're going to purchase. Quantity is a new field, and this will also be a number, so the quantity, we'll choose number. We'll add some more fields when we create the form, but for right now this will work. So let's save this. Let's close our table. Let's go check out the database tools and relationships. We'll have one more table to add to this now. So let's go to our invoice details, and let's just drag this onto the screen. And you will see that we have a relationship now between all of the tables in our program. And so this invoice details table is the most complicated. It's also one of the most important parts of the application. It pulls information from the invoice ID number. It also is going to show the products that are on each invoice. Let's close this and we'll save the changes. I'm going to save the next part for the next video. It's the most complicated part. It's how to create the actual invoice form. We're going to create something that looks like this. We've already created the tables that are going to work behind it, but now we're going to create the form. So let's do that in the next video. Welcome to another video in the Access Database application for our business. At this point, we're going to create the actual form for our invoice. Remember, in our last tutorial video, we were creating the tables that were going to go behind this scene. So in this form, we're going to create the place where we put our customers' names and then all the things that they order. So here we are in our database program. We're going to create a form, but we're going to do it a little bit different than we've done the previous forms. I'm going to select our invoice table to start with and choose Create. Look for the button called Form Wizard. Form Wizard is going to allow us to add fields from several different tables. We're going to combine things from our invoice table and our invoice details and our products table. Let's start with the invoice table. This form will show the invoice ID, it will show the date of the sale, and it will also show the customer ID. Next, let's do another check. We're going to select the invoice details table. On our form, we want to show the product ID, and we're also going to show the quantity that we're buying. Lastly, let's go to the table called the products table. We want to show the product name, and we also want to see the retail price. And all of these things come from various tables, and they will all show up on one single form. So this is the magic of Access. It lets you combine several tables into one report. This next screen shows what our invoice form will look like. At the heading, we're going to include the invoice detail, the date, and the customer information. In the subform, or the small detail area, we're going to include all the things for each line item. Let's click Next. There's two different ways to show your subform. I prefer the data sheet view. And then finally, let's click the Finish button. We get to have a customer create a purchase item. So I'm going to click Brand New down here, Blank Record. This is like if somebody comes up to the cashier and says, hey, I'd like to buy a bunch of stuff. First thing we're going to do is select maybe the customer name. So let's see. Cherry Pitts is our first customer. The date of sale. Let's pick a date. Today is the 25th. Now, what is she going to buy? Well, she's going to purchase a product, so let's pick one from the list. She's going to buy an iPad. How many does she need? Well, let's put in quantity. Let's put in 3. Now, we would expect to see that over here we would have, well, we have the retail price, but the subtotal. So this form isn't quite finished. We need to add some more things to it. So let's go and save this, and then let's go into the design view. We haven't seen the design view yet, but let's take a look at what it can do. We're going to move some things around so that way we can see them better. So for our invoice details, I'm going to click right on the little gray dot in the corner and move it over to the side here. And let's stretch the width here so we get some more space. And scroll down a bit more. Now, right after retail price, I want to do a subtotal. So I'm going to have to move the form footer down a bit to create some space. Now, I want to add a calculated field in here. So I'm going to go up into this row of items here. Under Form Design Tools, choosing Design, and then I pick this here called the text box. And I'm going to click right here. So this is a blank text box. It needs some information. First of all, let's give it a title. So the label on this will be called the subtotal. So we'll know how much this person's going to have to pay for this item. Now this is a calculated field. All the other fields have a database field name in them. And this one says unbound. In other words, there's no information to be put into there. We're going to have to program this one. Over here on the right side, there's a section called control source. There are two ways to fill in the control source. One is you simply select a field name. It's not what we want. We want to go to the last item where there are three dots and click here. This is how we calculate a field. We're going to create an expression to create a calculated control. For example, we can add two fields together and check to see if one is less than 5. Something similar to that. So I'm going to start with an equal sign. And then from these expression categories in the list, I'm going to select the quantity. So I'm going to double-click quantity. And you notice it adds brackets and says quantity. I'm going to press Shift 8 to get the multiply sign. I want to do quantity times the retail price. So double-click on retail price. So the price times the quantity should give us the subtotal. It shows us here what we're calculating. Last thing is, let's go and check to see if it works. So let's go to Form View, and let's scroll over. The subtotal shows up here. So we can see that the amount that we're buying, 11 Xboxes, are worth $240 each, or $2,640. Let's format these numbers now so that they show currency. So let's go back into the Design view, click on this square, and let's go to where it says Format. The format is going to be currency. Let's try that again. Let's save it, open up this form, and now we can see the subtotal shows the money. Now the column headers are a little bit too wide in some places and too narrow in others, so we can adjust that as well. Let's go into the Layout view. We can make the columns narrower. So let's see how that looks now. So let's go to Form View, and now we can see a fairly decent layout. So let's try again. Let's go down to the very bottom where it says Records. Let's create a new record. Let's say we're going to purchase something tomorrow. Let's give it a customer name, Jim Smith. And now we're going to enter some things. He wants a CPU fan. He wants 10 of those. The calculation is automatically updated. So we'll have him buy Windows 10, just one copy. That's $120. So as we add new items, we find that as he purchases them, the subtotal is calculated. Okay, so now we have subtotals. It would be nice to have a single total at the bottom of the page, so that's what we'll do next. Welcome to the next video in our Access database for our store. What we're going to create in this video is a subtotal at the bottom of the screen. And so you can see down here at the bottom that I have a order with a bunch of items, 7 items actually, and the total bill is $5,428. Let's add one more item to see if this actually works. I'm going to add a gamer's laptop. I'm going to pick one, and you should see the total update down here. As soon as I choose a new level, we have $7,000. And so this video is going to show you how to create this sum function at the bottom of the screen. This form for invoices has actually 2 different forms in one. If we open this up, this is the main form, it's called. And then this grid here is called the subform. So there's actually 2 different forms in our database list. And we're going to start with a subform. So let's close here. And I'm going to open up the subform and choose Design View. Notice on the subform that we're going to have the product ID, the quantity, the product name, and the retail price. Then our subtotal at the end of the line is what we've created as a custom formula. We're going to multiply the quantity we ordered times the price. Now we're going to put in something here in the form footer. If you can't see the form footer like I can, you can grab this bar and move it up or down to give it some more space so we can work in here. We're going to do a sum of all the subtotals. So you need to go up to here to where we have Form Design Tools, click on Design, and then choose this here called the text box. A text box simply allows you to place your own custom text box on the screen. So, first of all, let's give this text box a name. Over here it says name is text 18. We're going to call this the total price, how about? Now, The label needs to have something else. Let's go with total price on the label. Notice the text inside of this field is unbound, so we need to put a formula in here or tell it where to get this information. So let's go back over to here where it says control source. When I click on this line, I have two options. I can pick a source from the database, or I can click the three dots to create a custom formula. Here's my custom formula. You'll remember from Excel that if you want to add up things, you use the sum formula. So I'm going to choose equals SUM. And now I'm going to choose two things to add together. Remember, we have a field called quantity. I'm going to multiply that by the retail price. So I start typing RET, and we should see retail price. Close the parentheses here and click OK. Now when I choose Save and choose Form View, you will see that at the bottom of the invoice item we have the total here of $18,000. Now if we were to go to the datasheet view, this is what we're going to see on our order, and you notice that there's no subform total at the bottom. So this type of view doesn't have the actual subform that we're looking for, doesn't have the subtotal. But if we go to Form View, we can see it. Now one more thing before we leave this. Let's go to the Design view again and check on the name. What did we call this field? The field name is called Total Price. So that will be important. Okay, now the next step is to take this number and add it to the main form. So it's a little tricky. And so you'll have to follow the steps exactly here. Let's go open up our main form. Let's choose Design View here. And once again, we're going to be working down in the form footer. So you can adjust the bottom here so you can see a little bit of the form footer. Notice there's two footers. There's this subform on here. We're not interested in that one. We already have the quantity here. What we want to do is add a subtotal at the bottom of the page. So once more, I'm going to go back to the text box, Control, click it, and we're going to add a control about here. Let's call this thing the order total. So that'll be our label. And then for the name of this box, instead of text 15, we could also name this as order total. Okay, so now the idea is we're going to go and put in a custom formula into this field. Right now it says unbound, so there's no numbers in it. Let's go click on our form builder up here. Under Control Source, let's click on the Field Builder tool, and we'll start typing in what we expect to be put here. All we're going to do is we're going to borrow the name from what we got on our subform. So we've already got a form field on there. We're just going to borrow that. So we're going to say equals, and I'm going to take this from the subform name. So if I start typing the name of my subform, I'm going to get the word invoice, I-N-V-O-I-C. And so you can see that the invoice details subform comes up as one of my choices. So I'll double click that. So we're going to get something from this subform. Now I'm going to type the period and then type the word form again. An exclamation mark, which means we're going to get something from a custom created formula. And the field name. If you remember, it was called total price. So I type in T-O-T-A-L, price. And this formula, I'll zoom in so you can see it, has to be typed in exactly as it's written here. So this means basically take the total price field from the invoice subform. Click OK. If this doesn't show up in your field here, it means it didn't save it for some reason. Access sometimes needs to have the information typed in twice. Let's save this, and let's go look at our form view. And so now you can see that for this particular order, we have a order total at the bottom. So let's go look at the next order. That's $720, and this one is $12,000. The last thing we should do for this is to add dollar signs. So let's go back into our design view. Let's click on this field and go to our format option. And instead of just general, we're going to change it to currency. And now when we go back into our form view, we should see dollar signs here. So that was a little complicated. We had to create a sum of all the subtotals, and we had to put this on the subform. And then, from the subform, we took the number and put it onto our regular main form. So it's a little bit awkward. So if you follow the steps exactly, though, you should get a order total at the bottom of your page. Welcome to another video for our Access database store. In this video, we're going to create a query and we're going to create a report. Let's see what they are. A query is something that you can do to check through and sort data that's in a table. For example, if I go to Create and choose Query Design, I get an option to show all my tables and do some sorting and filtering on them. Let's go look at our invoice table. So I'm going to choose Add and also add our customer table. With these two, I could go through and find all of the sales that were done in the last month or in the last week. So let's add some things down to here. So for instance, I'm going to double click on Invoice ID, the date of the sale, and the customer's last name. Just those three. So I'm going to ignore everybody else. Down here though, in the invoice table, I have date of sale. I want to do a formula. So where it says criteria, I'm going to say everything that is greater than, and use a built-in formula in Access, greater than now, which is the exact time of now, today's date. And then I'm going to back up with -7. So anything that is greater than 7 days ago or to the present, and press enter. Now when I go look at my query data sheet view, I'm going to see all of the orders that I've placed in the last 7 days. Notice there's two orders here. There's order number 2 and 3. So there's an order missing from this thing. Where did it go? Let's go take a look at our invoice table by double-clicking on it. And you can see that the first invoice in my system was done back in February 5th. The current date on my computer is March 1st, and so you can see that this is more than 7 days ago. And so in our query, it doesn't show up. Remember, our query is only looking for items that are greater than now -7, so the last 7 days. Let's save this query. Let's give it a name. Let's call it Orders in the last 7 days. So if you're a business owner, you might want to go find the last 7 days of orders. So let's close both of these. You notice I have something in here called queries now. Orders in the last 7 days. Let's make a report on that. A report is something that you reprint. So let's go back to Create. While I have the query selected, I just click on the word Report. And this shows up as a report that you would run from your printer. We're not going to do anything special to that. We're just going to save it. And let's call this thing the Orders in the last 7 days report. So in databases, you have 4 things. You have tables, you have queries, you have forms, and reports. And now you've seen all 4 of them, or at least an example of them, and that'll get you started on your database. The next video, we're going to create a control form. So it'll be like the front end to our application, and then we'll be done. Welcome to the last video here on our Access database for an application to run our store. We're going to create a main menu, and that we can use this as a user-friendly program. We're not going to force our users to open and find forms. They're going to be easily available to us. This is pretty simple. We're going to create something called a navigation form. So let's click here on Navigation. And we have different kinds of forms, so you can pick any one of these. I'm going to choose the vertical tabs left. And so I'll have like an index over here, and then the forms and reports will show up in this section. Here's how it works. First of all, we would want to have someone else to run our program to be able to enter new customers. So I'm going to drag the customer form up to here. Notice the customer form shows up. I'm going to actually add the ability to add a product. So I'm going to click here and drag that up. So we have customers, products. We should be able to add and remove vendors, so I'll add vendors. Also, our users will probably want to enter invoices. That'll be the most common thing that we do at our store, so I'm going to take the invoice table and drag that over. Notice I'm going to leave the subform alone. The invoice subform is actually part of the invoice table form, so let's just leave that there. Also, we might want to run a report, so I'm just going to drag this report over to here, and now we have the report. And so that's really it. So if we were to go look at this as a form view, when our users run this program, they would click on these tabs, and then they would be able to access the different forms that we've created. And so now you see the importance of creating forms, and we don't give the user access to any of the tables. We don't let them go see those. Okay, now that we have our navigation form set up, we'd like to set the options so that the users do not get access to any of these forms and tables on the side, nor can they right-click and choose Design View and go change the program. So if we release this program to our users, we want it to be somewhat locked down. So the first thing you should do is save a backup copy of your database. The reason why is because if you lock the database down, you can't make any changes. So let's choose Save As, and let's give this thing a new name. So if I have Sluiter Store Back or Backup 2 or something like that, that will allow me to have a second copy of this so that I can get in and change it again later if I need to. So let's choose Save. Now it's going to ask you to enable content and ask you if you trust this program. Yes, you do. Okay, so to change this so that we can't get into some of the menus, let's go to the File menu and choose Options. Some of the options. On the current database, we need to first of all give it a title. So name your application, Sluiter Store. And then when we have the option for display form, the first thing we want our users to see when we open this is our navigation form. So that way we can get around in the program. We're going to hide some things. So let's go down a ways. The navigation pane. The navigation pane is all the things over here on the left. So we don't want them to get into the tables and edit them, so we'll uncheck that. Allow full menus? No, we don't want that either, because menus are when you right-click on something, you can choose Design View. So click OK. It says now you must close the program and reopen it to take effect. So let's choose Close, and let's go back and open it. Remember, I'm opening the backup version of this. So now you can see that my menu is the only thing visible. If I want to hide the top ribbon bar, I can click this little arrow, and now I have a very clean looking application. And so our products can be entered, our vendors can be entered, and we can create invoices and do some reports. So we're done now. This is a very simple version of the program to enter data into a database about sales at our store. You can imagine that if you had a real accounting system, there would be all kinds of things about inventory and about sales events and about discounts, but we just got the basics running here. So this is your first access application. Congratulations, you can consider yourself a database programmer now.